This is Arise America.
Now, a ban on race-based hair discrimination in the United States is a step closer after a vote in Congress. It's called the Crown Act, which stands for Creating a Respectful and Open World for Natural Hair. The House of Representatives passed the legislation which seeks to end discrimination against natural hair at work and school. The bill must still be approved by the Senate. President Joe Biden has urged lawmakers to swiftly pass the law. Black Americans say they are often treated unfairly at work and in schools because of their natural hair textures or protective styles like braids, knots, twists, and locks. If the Crown Act becomes law, natural hair discrimination will be treated as if it were race or national origin discrimination under federal civil rights law. Well, let's bring in Laurie Tharps, co-author, Hair Story, Untangling the Roots of Black Hair in America, to discuss this. Thank you for joining me on the program. Now, seems like a revolution is taking place in the U.S. with people of color saying enough is enough to white supremacy. Tell us about this awakening among the Black community.
Well, it might seem like an awakening now, but it's really a feeling and an energy that's been happening since African Americans have been in the United States. But it is definitely since the civil unrest of 2020, where we've seen real energy and action happening on a much higher level. And then what we're seeing is more non-Black people listening, responding, and seeing action being taken. I think the murder of George Floyd simply activated the energy and the determination for many Black people to do something, to make sure that we would have substantive changes beyond, just the, cries for, I should say, the visual demonstrations or marches and things. It was like, we need to do more than that now. And because the moment was right, I think we're seeing more changes actually happening, substantive changes.
Well, Laurie, I've read a few heartbreaking stories on the bias faced because of one's hair texture, color, or style. But how has the struggle been, and how did we even get here?
Yeah, I mean, it's really been a struggle that has been a struggle since African Americans or enslaved Africans were brought to this country. The hair has always been a point of contention, and it was really because our hair is a symbol of our Blackness that cannot be hidden, if you will. Our hair really defines us as different than Europeans or Caucasians. And literally, since we were brought here, white slave masters in the beginning would try to denigrate African people by saying we were less than human. And it was obvious because of physical characteristics like our hair. Our hair was more like animal hair than human hair. And so we've been constantly fighting over the years. Even though we are no longer enslaved, we are still fighting to have our hair recognized as beautiful, professional, that it's acceptable for popular consumption, for public consumption, without manipulating it and changing it and assimilating to European beauty ideals. So it's been a fight that we've been fighting literally to see our hair as, again, respectable and appropriate for public spaces without straightening it. And that's been a fight that we've had literally since we got here, since we arrived to the United States.
Interesting. Now, so much have been said really in the last few days about disrespect for Black women, including the jokes made on Jada Pinkett's hair loss. Do you think that having a Crown Act would give the Black community the much needed closure?
It's interesting. I actually just wrote a piece about this on my blog, My American Melting Pot, because on the one hand, having a federal law that would give Black Americans an opportunity to have the law on their side to fight any kind of legal action or being kicked out of school, being fired from a job, not even being hired from a job. It gives us an opportunity to fight back with the law on our side. but it doesn't really do anything to address the misconceptions, the prejudices, the anti-Black racism that exists against Black people. I mean, this law isn't going to make racism disappear, because if laws made racism disappear, then we wouldn't be having this discussion, because, you know, we have civil rights laws, we have hate crime laws, and that hasn't made hate disappear. What it does do is hopefully deter corporations and institutions from enacting racist hair policies, which is always a good thing. But there's still more work to be done for people to actually understand and respect the natural beauty of Black hair.
I'm actually going to address that, because from my understanding, I mean, that bill has already been captured in the 1964 Civil Rights Act. I mean, what has been the major challenge implementing it, and what makes this different?
Right, absolutely. So the Civil Rights Act of 1964 makes it's illegal to discriminate against somebody because of their race and traits that are what we would say immutable, like race, like gender. But hair, because it is mutable, it can be changed, hasn't been considered part of that act. Employers, employers, teachers, what have you, they can say, well, hair isn't protected in the Civil Rights Act because you can change it. It's not something you can't change. I mean, you can't change your race. So if we discriminate against you because of your race or maybe a physical disability, you know, that's covered in this law. So we need a separate law to actually say that natural Black hair should be protected by the law, because theoretically it is changeable, but a person shouldn't have to change a natural part of themselves in order to have a job, in order to be in a public school classroom without discrimination, without punishment. So that's the difference. The hair wasn't protected, wasn't considered part of a protected status in that 1964 Civil Rights Bill.
Laurie, you know, while we're having this conversation, I can't help but recall the Senate hearing for Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, not necessarily for the fierce attacks at her, but her hairstyle, which served as a stark reminder that the Senate has another matter before it. The House has passed it, though, but it has a major hurdle in the Senate. Do you think it would get the needed votes?
You know, it's so hard to tell. America is so unpredictable. You would think, how easy would it be to simply pass this simple bill that's really not going to make any substantive difference in anybody's life in terms of, you know, I don't know, a white man who maybe doesn't like natural Black hair or it makes him feel uncomfortable. This law isn't going to really make or break anybody's quality of life. It's simply a step. It is simply a tool that Black people can use should they be the victim of discriminatory action against their hair. And we are seeing some progress, but we're also still seeing a Senate that is deeply divided across party lines. And there is no real Republican or I don't want to say it's necessarily all Republicans, but we don't see a lot of positive outcomes for bills that embrace the racial or any sort of identity politics, if that's the case. So I'm not super hopeful, but I can always hope for a miracle.
Well, Laurie, I'm just going to have to say thank you, really. It was exciting talking to you. Laurie Tharps, Black hair advocate in America. Thank you very much for joining me.
This is Arise America.